Hello everyone, I am Ivy Corvus, and today we're going to be doing a deep dive into tree magic. I have pages and pages of notes today, and I'm going to kind of be taking you all over the place. This video is going to be a blend of shamanism meets witchcraft meets chaos magic, which kind of just sums up my magical practice in the first place. I'm going to be taking you through 6 different types of rituals that you can do with trees, and under each type of ritual there's actually going to be a bunch of mini rituals, so there's a lot of rituals in this video. And at the end of this video, I am going to give you some book recommendations as well, so you can further your research on this subject. If you're on my Instagram, you already know I am trying my best to not make this an hour-long documentary. However, I have a feeling with the amount of information I have in this video, it's going to be a long one, so get cozy. There's so much that I could say about trees, and I'm just going to be scratching the surface. So yes, this is going to be a deep dive, but just know that it's not deep enough. I wish that I had more time to dedicate to this subject. So the first thing that I want to say here is that this video is not really going to be a plant spirit 101 type video. I did already do a video on my channel that talked about the basics of working with plant allies and tree allies and just developing that relationship, what plant spirits even are, and that whole philosophical conversation. So I'm going to link that video down in the description box if you're looking more for a beginner video when working with plant and tree spirits. But this video, this is where we're going to go deeper into specifically tree spirits. I also want to say that this video is going to encompass how to use trees in your magical practice, as well as how to develop your relationship with tree spirits. This is not really going to be a video on the scientific communications of trees, or that's a whole nother subject that I wish I could make a 2-hour documentary about, but I am not qualified to do that, so I'm not going to. But there are many documentaries on trees that talk about how they communicate through their roots, and there's this whole scientific community of studying trees, and it's really, really cool. So I encourage you to also do some research on your own time and look at how trees communicate with each other. Again, there's like a million different documentaries. I think there was one in particular, it was either The Secret Life of Trees or The Hidden Life of Trees. I can't remember, but it was a pretty good documentary, so I encourage you to learn a little bit more about the science behind trees as well. But for today's video, we are going to talk about specifically the spiritual and magical aspects of trees. Now, this video would not be complete unless I at least briefly mentioned dryads. So I want to talk about dryad spirits a little bit further, and I also want to talk about some etiquette, just some basic etiquette when working with tree spirits. I think that's really important so we can lay a strong foundation and then build from there. So a dryad is a tree spirit, and the term dryad actually comes from a Greek word meaning oak tree, although the Greeks did also believe that every single tree had a spirit, not just oak trees. Dryads are believed to be elemental spirits. They live with one particular tree and they die when that tree dies. There is so much myth and lore about dryads, or these elemental spirits, and as with most things in the occult community, I don't think any of us have the right answer. So it's really interesting to work with these dryad spirits and kind of see how your own personal experience is and see if it matches up with other people's experiences. When I first started working with dryads, I thought that all trees had this sort of consciousness to it, and what I was able to deduce for myself over time is that it seems that some trees have a dryad and some trees don't, although I believe that all trees have some sort of spiritual essence to them. So this is where it gets really abstract, and I'd love to hear everyone's experiences in the comments. There are some trees that have this extra elemental spirit to it, and I can't quite describe what that is, but it's typically trees in a really old forest, or trees that used to be on some sort of sacred or spiritual site. Even if that sacred or spiritual site isn't there any longer, maybe it was bulldozed over and then later on a house was built there or something, but those trees still have that sacred essence to it because it had that connection to that spiritual site. So in my personal belief as an animist, all trees have spirits, but not all trees necessarily have this dryad spirit in them, this elemental spirit. And through all my reading over time and having conversations with people about dryads, it seems that a lot of people are experiencing the same thing as me. They have a lot of the same opinions. It feels like some of these trees have elemental spirits and some trees don't. Nobody seems to know why that is. I personally have a theory of why that is, but I'd like to hear from you in the comments what your experience is with dryads, and if you think that they exist within all trees or whether it's just select trees, and why. Because this is kind of where personal gnosis becomes somewhat verified personal gnosis, if it's with other people experiencing the same thing, we can kind of create an idea together about it. So curious to know your thoughts. But regardless, whether you believe in dryads or not, these elemental spirits, if we are operating from an animist perspective, which I feel like a lot of people do in the spiritual community, every tree has some sort of spiritual essence to it. We don't necessarily know the term for that spiritual essence, but there is something there that we can work with. But regardless, there is some sort of proper etiquette when working with trees and tree spirits, and I think that's something that's really, really important that we need to discuss. It is crucial that you show respect to these trees when working with them. If you show respect, I promise your relationship will be a lot better. This means that when you are harvesting, if you are harvesting from the tree, to do it in a very respectable and sustainable way. There's kind of this idea of asking for permission, and this is a lot of people in the spiritual community. This is not me just making this up right now, but there is a way to develop a relationship with a tree and then ask for permission. And it doesn't have to be an elaborate ritual. You can simply talk to the tree, explain what you're going to do, ask if you may take some leaves or if you may take a branch, etc. And if you feel inside that there is an intuitive yes happening there, then go ahead. But there are times where if I ask a plant or a tree, may I take some of your leaves or may I take a cutting, I feel like something's not quite right there. It just feels a little bit off. And so if I get that feeling, I will not take a cutting and I will move on elsewhere. Harvesting sustainably also means that when you are taking a cutting, making sure that you are not taking a huge cutting and, whacking all the branches off and taking all the leaves. Take a small amount for yourself, just as much as you need, but make sure that you leave the majority of the plant left. And even better, if you can find leaves on the ground, sticks on the ground. A lot of people view those sticks on the ground as gifts from the tree because the tree has shed that branch and you can now use it without having to harvest it directly from the tree. If you want to work with a tree that does not grow in your area and you are looking to maybe purchase some of the pine needles, let's say, or some of the root from that tree from a small business, or it doesn't even have to be a small business, but do a little bit of research for yourself on their harvesting methods and make sure that it is in some sort of eco-friendly, sustainable way. Another thing that I want to say here that's really important for developing that relationship with the tree, and when it comes time for harvesting, it's really nice to bring an offering or just bring offerings to trees in general, even if you're not there to harvest a stick or a leaf or whatever. And this can be as simple as you tending to the land, watering the land, adding some really rich compost to the soil, something that gives back to the land. So you're not just showing up and taking, you're actually giving something back as well, because that's what relationships are about, right? You want it to be a two-way street where there is a give and take process happening here. You're not just taking whatever you want whenever you want. You can even offer your energy as an exchange to a tree. So when we get into the section about doing some astral work with trees, if you're sitting at the base of a tree doing astral work, if you absorb some of the tree's energy, you can give some of your energy to that tree as well, and there is a symbiotic relationship there. So it's good to contemplate the etiquette around this and how you plan to go about developing relationships with trees. I promise you, if you try to have good etiquette, your experience will be a lot better with the dryads than if you were to be blatantly disrespectful, okay? Nobody needs to be disrespectful to the elemental spirits. The first type of ritual that we are going to be talking about today is rituals in the astral realm, when you're really doing astral work to work with these tree spirits. This does typically take quite a bit of visualization to do, but if you are someone that doesn't enjoy visualization or can't visualize, I do have an alternative for you as well. And I'm going to kind of discuss 4 different subtypes of astral work with trees. So for these first couple rituals, what you're going to want to do is go out into a forest if you can, or it can even be a park. It can literally be the trees in your backyard. Wherever there is a section of trees, walk around and try to find one that really energetically calls out to you. And I encourage you to go into this blind. And what I mean by that is don't look up anything about the trees beforehand. I mean, obviously, of course, you want to make sure that you're not sitting next to anything poisonous, but for the most part, try not to do too much research and don't look up the metaphysical properties of these trees beforehand, because you want to have this experience with a completely open mind, so that way you can develop your own personal gnosis first, and then you can go online afterwards and research everything about that tree and see what other people have experienced when working with this type of tree. That way you can get an idea of how it affects you personally versus how it was affecting other people. So find a tree in the forest, in your backyard, at a park, wherever it is, and you're going to want to sit at the base of this tree for these next couple rituals. Now, the very very first thing that you can do does not require visualization whatsoever. You are sitting at the base of the tree, closing your eyes, allowing yourself to go into some sort of altered state of consciousness. And if you have thoughts that roll in during this process, that's okay. You just acknowledge those thoughts, thank them for their existence, and then let them pass on by. And you just kind of want to sit in this stillness or this mindfulness and see if you receive any emotions or any physical sensations in your body. So you're going to figure out, okay, does this make me feel hot or cold? Am I feeling sad? Am I feeling protected or angry or happy? Whatever those emotions are, you're going to want to note that. So that way, when you are looking up those metaphysical properties later on, you can look at those in comparison to what you experienced and kind of go from there. Now, getting deeper into astral work, this is where we get into visualization. And I did do a collaboration with the Norse Witch. We did a whole video on the ins and outs of astral work. So if you're brand new to this and you want some advice for beginners and how to get started and all that stuff, I'll link that astral work video down below in the description box. But one of my favorite meditations to do sitting at the base of a tree is you allow yourself to go into that altered state of consciousness, and then you visualize yourself somewhat leaving your body and going around the back side of the tree. So you're walking around the back side of the tree, and on the back you see a little door. It can be a little fairy door, a little gnome door, whatever it is that you're visualizing in that moment. And then you step through that door and you are now inside the tree. And so you can spend as much time as you like here just kind of visualizing what the inside of the tree looks like. And with all of these astral meditations, I encourage you to do all of these with different types of trees to see what your different responses have been, or what different visuals were invoked for you, because it most likely is going to vary from tree to tree. And that's really where you kind of get to develop these relationships with trees and understand, ooh, this tree makes me feel like this and it would be great for a spell like that, or this tree makes me feel a completely different way. So definitely get experimental. Another little astral journey that you can do with trees is you can visualize that tree going through all 4 seasons and the emotions or the sensations that that tree might feel in each season. That is really wonderful for connecting to the tree spirit. And again, try it with multiple different types of trees and experience their process as they go through the different seasons. Now, the next astral technique, I don't even know if I would call this an astral technique or not. I've talked about the tendril technique in a couple of my other videos, but I think it's important to include that tendril technique in this video as well. But what you want to do is, sitting at the base of the tree, you want to go into your altered state of consciousness, and then you want to visualize these tendrils sprouting off from your body. It can be your hands, from your feet, wherever it is touching the ground or touching the tree, and visualize those tendrils growing longer and longer. This is probably something you just want to practice anyways for energy sensing, because the tendril technique is just great for sensing the energy in an environment or in an object in general, but you can also use the tendril technique to draw energy up. So if you're visualizing these tendrils leave your body and go deep into the roots of the tree, you can visualize drawing up some of that energy from the tree roots into your tendrils, and then retracting your tendrils all the way back into your hand or your foot and absorbing that energy into your body. And you can also give energy to the tree this way as well. So you can use the tendril technique to give some of your energy to the tree. And the last astral journey that I want to talk about is, let's say, for example, you don't have a tree near you. You don't have a tree in your backyard, your front yard, you can't go to the park, you cannot be physically next to a tree. What I would recommend is going on an astral journey to visit one of the most well-known mystical trees of the world. So there's a book recommendation for this that I'll talk about at the end of the video, but there are so many mystical trees in many, many different cultures. I mean, I think Yggdrasil is probably one of the most well-known ones. Yggdrasil is a sacred tree in Norse cosmology, and so there's many different types of these mystical trees that you can travel to in the astral realm. So that is a really, really fun experience, going to see these more, not necessarily a physical tree that's planted into the earth, but more like these metaphysical trees that exist either solely on the astral plane or as an egregore from multiple different cultures feeding their energy into it over the years. Again, I'll talk more about this at the end when I have that book recommendation, but that is something that you can do just in case you can't be physically next to a tree. The next type of ritual that I want to talk about is creating some sort of sacred tree tasting ceremony for yourself. And this can be an entirely sacred, spiritual, sensory experience. So get a couple little cups. I have these little wooden cups that are perfect for a tasting ceremony. And if you're unable to harvest some of the trees yourself, just do your research to find a good company online. I was able to find 2 trees that I was not able to harvest on my own. So I have some pine needle tea that I'm gonna try. It's just straight up pine needles. And then I have some birch leaf tea that I'm gonna try with you today as well. And the entire bag, let me show you the inside. It is literally a bag of leaves. So you could absolutely harvest this yourself if you wanted to. And I think it might even be more powerful if you were able to harvest it yourself. But create a whole tea ceremony surrounded around trees and tasting those trees, because they all do taste very differently. So if you're not a person that loves visualization with the astral techniques that I just shared, you can do this more physically sensory experience of tasting the trees and seeing if they bring in any sort of emotions for you, or sensations, or even visions, who knows. Okay, so I have my pine needle tea here that I'm gonna try with you today. And again, I encourage you to try to do this without looking up the metaphysical properties first, just to see what kind of images you may get or emotions, etc. Pine to me has always tasted really joyful, really light. It doesn't quite taste like citrus. There is no citrus in the flavor, but it feels like citrus, if that makes sense. It just feels so joyful and uplifting, at least to me personally. Okay, now let's try birch. There is a sharpness with birch. It makes me feel, I feel like I could maybe use this in protection magic, or maybe even with a little bit of offense. There's a little bit of bitterness to it. It's a totally different flavor than pine needles. It's not bad tasting by any means, but it just feels more sharp, I guess is the only way that I can describe it. I personally have never worked with birch, and I haven't even looked up the metaphysical properties for it, so this really is an experiment with you today. And I mean, with these rituals, you could cast sacred space, you could set up a whole little altar with all these different teas in front of you and all these little cups to try them. Maybe do it with a friend or do it as a group. That would be a really fun group experiment to see what everyone gets from these different tastes. Make your whole altar space as beautiful as you want it to be. Add some crystals, add some incense, you know, burn something in the background. And what you really want to do is kind of sit in silence for a moment and meditate with that. Really savor it in your mouth, see if anything comes up for you. But I encourage everyone to do a tea tasting ceremony because it's so fun. It's such a fun way to connect to the spirit of that tree. You know, I wanted to add here really quick before we move on. I just tasted these again after about 5-10 minutes of letting them sit. And it's funny, the pine needles initially felt really joyous and light and citrus-like, even though it didn't have that citrus flavor. But now that I taste it, there's almost a little bit of a pepper aftertaste that comes with it. So it's light and sweet and joyous, but there is that peppery aftertaste that's a little bit aggressive. So I could see pine also being used really well, not only for maybe joy rituals or happiness related rituals, but also for protection. I can feel that underlying little pepper to the end. Whereas birch, I originally said that it kind of tasted sharp and really strong, and I still agree with that, but after about 5-10 minutes of letting it sit and savoring it and tasting it a little bit more, there's almost a little bit of sweetness that comes at the very end. So I think it's very strong and sharp, but there is this level of maybe a nurturing sweetness to it as well, or maybe like a royal, regal sweetness to it. It gives me queen vibes. Let me just say that about birch. So I just had to give a little update after tasting these again. The next type of ritual that I want to talk about is some sort of folk magic ritual. And there's actually a lot of mini rituals that I'm going to put under this category of a folk magic ritual. So a great way to connect to a tree spirit after you have harvest sustainably, of course, some of that tree, you can use it in your ritual. I typically like to burn them during my ritual to invoke some sort of emotions. Like for example, the oak tree is seen as a really spiritual tree among many different cultures. And so burning some oak can help you get into an altered state of consciousness, maybe help with some lucid dreaming or some scrying or an astral trip. But what I like to do when I'm burning them in ritual is I take a charcoal disc and I light it up, and as you light it, you'll see it kind of crackle across the whole charcoal disc, and that's when you know the whole thing is lit up and ready to go. You put it in some sort of fire-safe dish. I usually put it in my cauldron, and then you just sprinkle the pine needles or or the oak bark or whatever it is right on top of that charcoal disc, and it smokes really nice and wonderfully. And you can use that smoke in ritual. You can use that smoke to help you get into that altered state of consciousness, or I like to pass my ritual tools through that smoke if I'm wanting to add additional correspondence. So let's say I'm doing a ritual cord cutting with my athame, my ritual knife. I'm going to take that knife and I'm going to run it through the smoke just to add that extra correspondence of pine, oak, or birch, or whatever it is that I'm actually burning in my cauldron. You can also use the smoke for scrying, so you can take some time to let your eyes soften a bit, staring into the smoke, and see if anything visually comes up for you. You can also burn the leaves or the bark or the root during ritual to entice certain spirits into your space if you're wanting to work with someone or something a little bit more. It just adds that nice extra layer of correspondence. You can also put a little piece of the tree in spell jars, spell bags. You can stuff them into poppets or surround the poppets with trees for healing. You can hang certain branches above your door to bring specific energies in. So if there's a tree that you're really wanting to work with that really does correlate to love or joy or happiness or whatever that is for you, hang a couple branches over the threshold of your door to help invite those energies into your space. Or let's say you're working with a tree that really specializes in protection for you. It feels very, very protective. You can make a wreath out of the fallen twigs from that tree and hang it on your front door and turn it into some sort of ward to protect your home. And I also think it's important to consider the different parts of the tree and what that may mean. So what does the root of the tree mean versus a leaf versus a seed? Those three things are going to have very different energetics as well. So it's not just the tree and what the tree symbolizes, but also the stage of life that it's in. A root would be really, really grounding and stable, whereas a seed would represent new life and new beginnings. So I think it's important to consider that as well. The next type of ritual that I want to talk about is Celtic tree rituals. There are many, many different cultures that used to worship trees, including the Celts, the Germanic people, Slavic people. But for me personally, Celtic tree rituals is something near and dear to my heart that I really wanted to talk about. And before we get into the ritual part of it, I want to talk about, I think it's important to understand how the Celts potentially viewed trees, although we have very, very little information actually on the Celts. But it's said that the sacred tree of Celtic people served as some sort of talisman for the entire town or village or clan, whatever you want to call it. If there was some sort of sacred tree in the middle of the clan or the tribe, it was a symbol of power and wisdom. There was a lot that happened around the tree. I mean, they would pass judgment next to the tree. They would conduct spiritual rituals next to the tree. And it was actually seen as a way to demoralize another tribe if you were to go to another tribe and destroy their tree, because that tree to the tribe was so sacred. It was such an integral part of the community, the culture. And then there's also the Celtic Ogham, which is an alphabet of, I think it's 25 letters. It originally was 20 letters, and then I think 5 letters were added on at a later date. I do have book recommendations for all of this at the end of the video, but maybe getting into the Celtic Ogham and learning that language and seeing if you can use it as somewhat of a rune system if you're wanting to connect with particular trees, or just use them in a more divination geared way. You can use the Celtic Ogham, or you can even use the language to inscribe certain symbols. What they used to do is they would carve these symbols into the wood or into a stick or a staff or something, and it would imbue it with a lot more power. So you can use the Celtic Ogham as a rune-like divination system. You can also just use it as a language in general to write things in. Every symbol connects to or has correspondence to a specific type of tree. And you can also work with the Celtic tree calendar as well. So what I think is really fun is actually looking up your birth date in the Celtic tree calendar and seeing whether you're a willow tree or whether you were an ash tree, etc. Every tree rules a section of the tree calendar. So find your birth tree in the Celtic tree calendar and then try to connect with that tree a little bit more. Learn about the metaphysical properties, maybe try working with it a little bit in a ritual, see what happens. I think it's fun to figure out what your birth tree is, and does it relate to your personality or not? I don't know, but that's for you to explore and to see what that relationship looks like. So I actually have 2 books at the end that we're going to talk about when it comes to working with trees in a Celtic sense and doing those types of rituals. So that way you can have more specific ideas of what to do. The 5th type of ritual that we're going to talk about is crafting your own ritual tools from trees. So if you have fallen sticks that you collect that really just call out to you, you like the shape of it. This stick in particular, it's funny, I don't even know what tree this came from, but the the energy of this stick felt so good. I had to have it. It fit perfectly in my hand. I loved that it had a little notch here so I could hold it like this. I can also hold it as a writing utensil for myself. I just really loved the shape of this thing. If you watch some of my other videos, you've probably already seen my wand, but I spent some time carving in different symbols. I have my own language, so I carved in a couple words from my own language on here. But creating your own wand from a specific tree, let's say, maybe you do know where the branch is coming from. If you're wanting to bring in that type of energy from that tree into your ritual, one of the best ways to do that is using a wand from that particular tree. And I don't really use wands too often, but I do find that they are incredible for directing energy to exactly where you want it to go. So if I'm casting sacred space, or if I'm wanting to direct my energy into an object, I can use my wand as kind of a focal point and a way to push my energy in the way that I want it to go. And I also think that wood burning is just so powerful in general. There was another thing that I kind of wanted to show you. My cousin made this, and my cousin, if you are watching this, I love you so much. I'm not going to share her name on camera, but she made this for me, and it is somewhat of a talisman that she made for me when working with the horned god, because I've been working with the horned god a lot recently. So now this piece of wood where she did that wood burning, I use this in every single ritual to entice the horned god into my space with the symbolism, and also it being on a tree, which correlates to the horned god because he likes to be in the forest around trees. So I think taking the time to do some wood burning, and I'm not the best at wood burning, okay? I mean, look at this. It's not good by any means. It's not the greatest wood burning that you've ever seen, but it doesn't matter, because when I was wood burning this, I spent a lot of time and energy and effort to add all the symbols and to figure out exactly what I wanted to put on my wand. And I think that's really the most important part. And it's interesting because ancient healers used to use twigs that fell on the ground as wands to really kind of direct energy and extract the evil spirits from someone's body. So using a tree branch from a specific tree was really, really powerful. And you can create walking sticks out of this. So let's say you want to enchant a walking stick from a particular tree that you're working with to really help guide your way when you're going through the forest. Maybe you get lost easily and you want some sort of talisman to help you navigate yourself throughout the forest. You can even enchant your walking stick with the intention of protection, or maybe you want your walking stick to actually be a talisman to attract certain things to you. Maybe you are mushroom hunting, and so you create a walking stick from a particular tree that you resonate with and want to bring in that energy, but you make it for the sole purpose of attracting mycelium and really helping yourself find the mushrooms in the first place. If you're looking to harvest some mushrooms, creating that talisman to help you find the mushrooms might be really helpful. You can also create a broom or a besom, I've heard it pronounced both ways, but some sort of spiritual broom to help sweep the negative energies out of your space. So let's say you have this big, beautiful tree in your backyard that you really associate with protection, and there is a huge fallen branch after a storm. Maybe you go out and you pick up that branch and you shave it off, clean it up, make it look really nice, and then you turn that into a really long handle and then attach a broom head to it, or create your own broom head, whatever you want to do, but use that to spiritually cleanse your space by sweeping out the negative energy from that, using that protective tree that you have in your backyard or your front yard. So there's so many different ways that you can use trees to create your own ritual tools, and I personally think it's incredibly powerful when you can actually create your own spiritual tools. The last type of ritual that I want to talk about is creating some sort of ward out of a tree near your home. I love tree wards. Tree wards are so cool and so fun, and there's so many different things that you can do with them. So let's say you have a tree in your front yard or your backyard, or even if you don't, you can do this with a bonsai tree inside your home. You can literally have a tree in a pot inside your home and do the same exact thing. My partner is obsessed with bonsai trees. They have like 50 plus bonsai trees, so I know a lot about bonsais at this point. But I did want to say, I already did a whole video on guardian wards and what they are and all the different types of guardian wards. Having a tree ward is just one type of a guardian ward, so if you're interested in learning a little bit more about this topic in depth, I'll link that video down below in the description box as well about the guardian wards and whatnot. But let's say you have this tree in your front yard, okay, or you've got it in a pot or in your backyard, whatever. Over time, you've developed this relationship with this tree. Eventually eventually you can intuitively ask that tree, will you be my ward? Will you be my guardian ward and watch over this land, watch over my house, watch over me, you know, just kind of watch over this space. And in my experience, it gives a really nice protective aura to the space. So you want to continue that relationship by obviously giving your energy, giving your offerings, tending to the land, and in turn, that tree will be your ward and offer this aura of protection. And then what you can do from there is you can actually hang things on the tree that are additional wards, or, you know, it doesn't even have to be a ward, it can be a talisman to attract something in. But I love tree wards because it can kind of start to look like the Blair Witch Project a little bit. You can take some fallen sticks and hot glue them together to create some sort of protective symbol. What I've seen is that some people like to glue them into more of a triangle shape. You have these fallen sticks that you've glued together in this triangle stick, and then you hang them on your tree like a little ornament, and you enchant them with your intention of protection. So you have these additional wards on top of your tree ward to really amplify that energy of just protecting your land, of protecting your home and you. But again, it doesn't have to be just wards. You can hang talismans and charms and all these things from tree branches in your space to really invite in the energy on your land that you want in your space. So take some time to craft some beautiful sun catchers or beautiful ornaments, enchant them with whatever intentions you want, hang them from the trees, and spend time out there just absorbing all of that juicy, delicious energy. Develop a relationship with your tree. I've seen some people even create whole altars around their tree, or maybe on a tree. Maybe they have a flat piece that they have attached to the tree somehow, and they have an altar set up on top of a branch. You can have this altar dedicated to some sort of deity that lives in the forest or that works with tree spirits. The idea of having an outdoor altar is so freeing and so beautiful, especially when it's with a tree that you already have a relationship with. So if you're interested in guardian wards, definitely check out the video that I already did on that, because that is probably the one I utilize the most when I'm working with tree spirits, is really trying to develop that two-way relationship so that I am giving energy to the land and tending to it, and my trees are also protecting the land and protecting me in the process. Now let's move on to some book recommendations. I have 3 books here that I want to talk about with you, and if you saw my last book haul, I have read so many books on trees at this point. I mean, I think just out of the books that I own, I think I probably own close to 10 different tree magic books, and then I've read more than that because I don't own all the ones that I've read. But there are 3 here that I want to talk to you about because they are my favorites, and I think that everybody that's interested in this subject needs to read these books for very different reasons, for 3 very distinct reasons. The first book that I want to talk about is called Tree Magic: Connecting with the Spirit and Wisdom of Trees. This is by Sandra Keynes. I'm not sure how to pronounce their last name. The reason why I'm recommending this book is because I think this is an excellent introduction to tree magic. It kind of has a little bit of everything. It does go into the Celtic Ogham a little bit. It talks about how to work with tree spirits in general, how to craft certain tools from trees. But what I really love about this book is that the whole second half is basically just a tree profiling section where it goes through a bunch of different types of trees, and it gives you a description about the tree, how to use it in your magical practice, maybe some history with that tree of what it was originally used for. It even includes all of the correspondences with that tree, like the elements, the deities, the time in the Celtic tree calendar. It talks about, you know, different things that you can do for spell work and ritual. So I thought this was pretty thorough. I've read a couple books that have a whole section on tree profiling, and I preferred this layout over the other ones that I was looking through. So that's why I feel like this is just an excellent book for someone just getting into tree magic that wants a really good tree profiling section. That way you can just kind of flip through and say, okay, I'm working with oak today. What does oak represent? How can I use it in a magical sense? This is a great resource for that. But it's not just a tree profiling book too, because there were a couple books that I read which was just about tree profiling, and it didn't talk at all about different rituals that you could do. It didn't talk about how to connect with the tree. It definitely didn't mention the Celtic Ogham. So again, I feel like this book gives a little bit of everything. So it's just a nice starting place for someone. The next book is if you really want to get into Celtic tree rituals a lot deeper and the Celtic Ogham. So this one's literally called Celtic Tree Rituals: Ceremonies for the 13 Moon Months and a Day. And this is by Charlene Hidalgo. So this one's great because it goes a lot deeper into the Celtic Ogham. Whereas this one gives a kind of a general overview, this one really goes a lot deeper into that if that's something that you're interested in. And it gives you very specific rituals that you can do with every single tree on the Celtic tree calendar. So if you are interested in learning about your birth tree and connecting with that a little bit more, this is going to be the book that you want to go to for that. It is so incredibly thorough. I mean, it has chants in here, like incantations that you can do during your rituals. And there's just so much inspiration. So if you're interested in the Celtic side of things, definitely pick this book up. And the last book that I want to recommend is my favorite. This book is so good that I read it once and I'm actually now, you can see my bookmark, I'm reading it a second time. So this book is called Under the Sacred Canopy, Working Magic with the Mystical Trees of the World. And this is by J.D. Walker. So this book is great for, if you remember when we were talking about astral work in the very beginning of this video, and I mentioned if you don't necessarily have a tree next to you, you can also do some sort of astral journey to travel to some sort of mystical tree. This book talks about all the mystical trees across many different cultures, and it is so incredibly thorough and rich with stories and interesting things that people used to do in these ancient civilizations. And it was just fascinating. I mean, you have to be a person that's interested in stuff like that, of course, but I loved this book so much. Just seeing how different cultures viewed trees and worked with them over hundreds and hundreds of years and how that's evolved, it was just, oh, it was so good. So just for example, it has information on how trees were viewed in India, Britain, Japan, the United States, Greece. It goes into Yggdrasil, as we were talking about earlier, Malaysia and Thailand and Germany and Saudi Arabia. It really does go all over the place, and I loved this book for that. So I cannot praise this book enough. If you're looking for just an overview on tree magic though, this one is still going to be better for that, but I just loved this book because it was interesting, and the stuff that it talked about was stuff that I knew nothing about, so it was really eye-opening. I wanted to take a quick second to say thank you so much to my channel members for suggesting that I cover this topic, because this was so fun for me to do. I love doing these types of videos. So thank you to my channel members. If anyone is interested in becoming a channel member, it comes with a bunch of extra perks. You get early access to my videos. I'm starting to do some planetary magic forecasts now, and it comes with content polls and a couple other things. So I will leave that all in the description box as well, and the link to click on it. It's not on Patreon. I've gotten a lot of questions about that. It's through YouTube. It's a YouTube channel membership. So anyways, thank you so much, channel members. I hope everyone enjoyed this video. Let me know your thoughts about everything. I love reading the comments about this kind of stuff. Trees are such an integral part to my magical practice, so I'm happy that I finally got the time to actually talk about them. So thank you for watching. I'll see you in a video soon. Bye everyone.